Hello, today we're talking about a book from McCoy Publishing and Masonic Supply, and it's a unique book for us. It's called The Red Aprons: The French Influence on Freemasonry by Louis Arnefel. I don't speak French, so pardon my mispronunciation. So the author takes a very different look at it's not crazy different, but he takes a different look at Masonic history because most of the history that we get exposed to here in the US is written by Americans or English authors, right? But there are what this author is saying basically is there's complex issues surrounding Masonic events. He has three C's that there's complex issues surrounding Masonic events, and it doesn't occur in a vacuum. So, what was going on in the profane world when the events occurred in our Freemasonry that provides us context of why they happened or what influence they had on what was going on in Freemasonry? And the final thing is, how do we come to some concrete conclusions with the information that we have? So in this book, what he answers is one, where does the word in French, and I don't speak French, it's franc-maçon, I guess. And how did the Crusaders influence the naming of French Freemasons? Because franc is not the word for free in French. The other chapter talks about looking for Herodome. This is the mountain of initiation, and why is this mountain of importance to Freemasonry? The name of the Scottish rite is Ecosysmi, and I didn't pronounce it correctly. I don't think you pronounced the E in that. But its influence on the world, especially in England and the US. And then why do French wear red aprons? You can see that over here. And then the York ritual, why do we call our ritual the York ritual? So these are the questions that he answers in this book, and it's a pretty cool book. Today, what we're going to talk about basically is the French-Scottish rite. And I'll go through it pretty quickly. He does a better job in the book, so I would really encourage you to get the book. So this Ecosysmi, the 33 degrees of the ancient and accepted Scottish rite, the context is that the English and the French were almost constantly at war between 1714 and 1815. And this a guy that you see the picture of is Chevrolet, that's it, butchering French. Ramsay, basically, in his second discourse in 1738, connects the Scottish Rite Templars in the 14th century with Freemasonry. So he believes that that's where Freemasonry came over. It's fanciful. But French Freemasons then started to make new grades or higher degrees, and they called them the Scottish Rite. And the reason why that is because the French word that you see there, which I'm not going to try to pronounce because I've butchered everything else, translate to Scottish or Scot. So they were called the Scot degrees because of Ramsay's connecting the Templars with Freemasonry, the Scottish Templars. It wasn't because they came from Scotland, it was how he did this. So basically, from 1740 to 1745, these degrees multiplied and spread all over Europe. And reports from historians like Gould and Huhan and Lay and others. And so they answered the question, why? Well, Eric Ward, in one article in the AQC, relates to French flamboyance is why they started to spread, and also because they had a desire, the French did, to one better the English. So they were excited about spreading their work. The French developed the Rite of Perfection. That was at 15 to 18 degrees, as you all know, if you're in the Scottish Rite, in 1761. And it's really the influence was the big rivalry between English craft masonry and the French high degrees. Each wanted to dominate Europe in this later part of the 18th century. And then, of course, came Napoleon. So from 1799, 1815, he made himself emperor in 1804. And he took over a large part of Europe, as you guys know. And of course, as you also know, the English were not too happy about that. Napoleon used Freemasonry, and this is the key. Napoleon used Freemasonry as a tool to spread his new government in the countries he conquered. So this was his way of kind of integrating into those countries. He used Freemasonry to do that. And then the author suggests that as England saw this happening, and they had the ancients and the moderns, they had two, they were influenced and said, we need to bring these two together because that was the monarchy. And they said, this needs to happen. Again, that's the opinion of the author. You can decide whether he's right or wrong. So what does this have to do with the US or with us? Well, Etienne Morin, or Stephen Morin, left the Caribbean, because he was down in one of the Caribbean islands because of a slave revolt, and he came to Charleston, South Carolina. He taught the French Scottish Rite to a guy named Franklin, who and his rites, and they spread it all throughout the United States, mostly in the South, is where my understanding. Again, you'll have to do the history better up. You can read some of the works from the Scottish Research Society. Art de Hoyos has some great research on this also. Anyway, Dalco then founded the AASR in Charleston in 1801. This was not a direct copy of the French Scottish Rite. It was different. Again, you can read about it, and that's when it was certainly influenced by it, right? Because that's when it came in. And then also just to understand that Pike's Scottish Rite, if you've been through it, is different than the French Scottish Rite. He added a lot more detail. The lectures and the commentary is more elaborate. The most common degrees are the Rite of Perfection, or the 15 to 18 degrees. And that's it. So that's kind of an overview. There's another 10 pages or so on the end that the author does a really good job explaining some more things, but I just thought for this video it was kind of fun. So the French influence for Britain and the U.S., the author suggests that world politics at the time played an influence on the reunion of the moderns and ancients, that the French expansion in the New World introduced the higher degrees to America, which influenced Pike and his predecessors. And you can read more about French regalia and other influences the French and continental Freemasonry had on the craft. If you'd like, purchase the book. It's called The Red Aprons, The French Influence on Freemasonry at Macoy.com. Thank you.
My good friend Etienne, here is some help on how to pronounce the French words in the book, The Red Aprons. First, my name is Louis Arnolf. In the book, I am dealing with the French franc-maçons. And finally, the 33 degrees are called ecosystem, or you might as well say ecosystem in English. That also works. I just hope you will find this useful. Happy reading!